including principals. So I know that we're going to continue to get updates and more information. So if I can't answer your question today, I will definitely follow up once we have the answers to that. Also, just to let you know that this meeting will be recorded. So just so that you know that it is being recorded, it'll be shared with families who aren't able to attend during these scheduled times. Let me just get my screen. Let's see. I need to share my screen here. Oh, okay. Do you see my presentation slide, Ms. Peoples? Or are you seeing the Zoom slide still?
We can see your presentation slide.
Okay, great. Just making sure. Can't believe I'm fumbling my presentation skills on Zoom after all the practice I had this past year. All right. Just a brief overview of the agenda. So I plan to start off with an overview of the district COVID guidelines that were released last Thursday. I didn't include every single guideline that they have published. It is available on the district website. I chose the ones that were more specific, I think, to our campus and our community and our grade level. But if you are interested in seeing the extent of what they've published, it is available on the website. I then want to talk a little bit about what we're doing, how we're incorporating those district guidelines into our safety plan here at Spicewood, and then what we're doing also to kind of enhance some of the guidelines that we have been presented. I will also discuss events and any kind of extracurricular activities. I think a lot of those questions will be answered in our review of the guidelines. And then I'll go over the Padlet questions that were presented. So just starting with those district guidelines, I know that they were published and they were sent out to families. I'm pretty sure that not everyone has had that opportunity to look over them. So this is just an overview. So the district has issued guidelines over arrival, dismissal, what we're allowed to do in the cafeteria, classrooms, and just recommendations that they are giving us this year to kind of help guide us in keeping our students safe. So the district has stated that staff and students must pre-screen prior to arriving to school. I know that that was part of the protocol last year, so it's the same process that was followed last year for the pre-screening. We are going to, they recommend separate entrances and exits so that we can minimize the crowding, minimize the number of kids coming in at one time in one space. And they also recommend that we have hand sanitizer available at all entry and exit points, and also just in various places around the campus. They've recommended that students have assigned seating in the cafeteria and assigned seating that allows for social distancing to the extent possible. Assigned seating will also help with any kind of contact tracing that we might need to do. Physical distancing will be maintained when the students go through the lunch line. So while they're waiting to get their food in the lunch line, we will make sure that the students are spaced 3 or 6 feet apart if that's possible. And then tables are going to be sanitized after each class leaves the cafeteria. In the classroom, to the extent possible, we will maintain physical distancing of 3 feet. And that's per the CDC guidelines. Of course, as I'm sure you know, if we have a classroom that is, a pretty full classroom of 20 students, for example, those physical distancing recommendations are much more harder for us to adhere to, but to the extent possible, we are going to do everything we can to make sure our students have that space between them. Desk shields are still on our campus. If parents feel that they would like their child to have a desk shield, or if a student themselves request a desk shield, those will be provided. They are the plexiglass, I think it's a 3-sided desk shield. Any high touch surfaces will be disinfected daily. And then again, hand sanitizer will be available in multiple areas. We still have quite a bit of PPE here on our campus. So we have that ready and available to distribute to our teachers on day one. So all of our classroom teachers will have a full supply of PPE for their classroom when students arrive. The district has stated that visitor access during school hours will be limited to essential business. So individuals who are deemed essential will be able to access the building. And that's at the middle school and elementary level. And we are going to continue to utilize virtual meetings so that we are limiting the number of people outside coming into our campus. And then before or after school hours, the district has allowed non-essential visitors to participate in campus activities. So that means that we will be able to have Cub Scout meetings, for example, here on campus after school hours. We'll be able to have in any enrichment programs that had been here previously to last year. Those can happen also after school hours. So as long as it's happening when the majority of our students are not in school, we are able to allow non-essential visitors into the building. I know that there are questions about the ventilation systems here. Round Rock ISD did provide information on their COVID guidelines webpage about the updates they've done. I know that there have been modifications to the HVAC equipment so that the system runs to introduce more of that outside air into the building. And that's during the times where people are here on campus. And all of the HVAC systems have been equipped with improved filtration. So that kind of helps reduce that spread of the airborne illnesses. We also are following the recommendations issued by local health authorities and CDC about isolation and quarantine. The number one recommendation, we ask that everyone, please, if you have a sick child, if we have an employee who's not feeling well, to stay home. That is definitely very important, especially now. If your child is sick, we ask that you please keep them home. If an individual displays symptoms of COVID-19, and that's in a way that's not normal. So, if you know your child typically has seasonal allergies and they are sneezing around the time that they usually have those sneezing fits, then those are kind of understandable symptoms that are explainable. But if these are symptoms that are out of the ordinary, they're symptoms that your child may not have had before, they're not typical, then in those instances, those students will be sent home. And the individuals who are sent home because of those symptoms must be fever-free for 24 hours, and that's without any kind of fever-reducing medication, and the symptoms must have resolved before returning to campus. Anyone testing positive or is a probable case, and that means that they've come into close contact with an individual who has been confirmed positive. So if you've come into close contact, and the CDC defines close contact as someone who has been within 6 feet of a confirmed positive person for a cumulative total of 15 minutes over a 24-hour period. So it's not like, you're standing for 15 consecutive minutes with that individual. It can be just over the period of 24 hours that you've had 15 minutes of close contact. That means within 6 feet of that individual. So those are presumed positive cases. And anyone who is presumed positive or has tested positive, they must isolate for 10 days, starting on the day of symptoms. If they're asymptomatic, then it would be the day that they received the positive results of a COVID test. And at least 24 hours, and they can return return back to school after the 10 days, and at least 24 hours since they've been fever-free without medication, and all other symptoms have improved as well. And masks, I know, are very much an important topic, and rightly so. That is definitely one of the safety measures that we have learned has really been an effective way at preventing the spread of COVID-19. And the CDC is also encouraging everyone, whether vaccinated or not, to wear masks when they are indoors. However, as many of you are aware, Governor Abbott did issue an executive order stating that districts cannot require students, staff, or visitors to wear masks. So we are also obligated to follow that executive order. We don't have the authority to mandate mask use, mask wearing in our schools. Here's just a little bit of what we've been talking about. And I want to just give you a little a caveat here that these are safety protocols and ideas that we've discussed as a leadership team here. Our teachers will be returning back to school next week, and this is really a lot of what we're planning here is also going to include the input of our teachers. You know, I want to hear from them. I want to hear what they felt worked well here last year, what their level of comfort is. So these are still right now just kind of recommendations, and we will have a solid plan that we communicate with our families before the first day of school. But these are some preliminary ideas that we've been discussing. We will have an arrival and dismissal map, and that's going to be shared prior to the first day of school. It's going to be probably identical to what was used last year. So we have separate entry and exit points for students depending on how they get to school. We're going to have the staggered dismissal using the iDismiss app. So that will mean that students are staying in their classroom and they will be called out when their ride is there to pick them up. So we're not having crowds of students standing outside waiting for pickup at the end of the day. We're going to continue to have breakfast in the classroom as opposed to having kids sitting in the cafeteria. We might reconsider that option depending on the number of students who are choosing breakfast in the breakfast in the morning. If it's a small number, then we might just have them go ahead and eat in the cafeteria, and that way they can be spaced apart in there. But we want to kind of gauge and see the number of students who are choosing breakfast in the morning. And then again, we're going to have students walking directly to their classroom. So we ask parents to arrive to school as close to the start time as possible. We don't want to have students waiting outside in groups. We want them to just be able to come in the doors and walk directly to their classroom. My message to our community, to my staff, teachers, is that I strongly recommend that we are all wearing masks. I have my mask here, my door is closed, but I've been wearing my mask at school. You know, I feel like we have a responsibility to protect our students and the members of our community, and we're all part of that shared responsibility. We know that our students are not eligible for a vaccine right now, and an important way that we can support our students and ensure their health and safety to the best of our ability is to wear a mask. So I will strongly recommend, again, in accordance with Abbott's executive order, I am not able to mandate mask wearing, but I will certainly recommend it. And I know from my experience last year and from the experience here at Spicewood last year, from what I've heard, students really did well wearing masks. We had no issues with students wearing masks. They had no issues wearing masks. They felt comfortable doing it. It really was something that just became part of their normal routine. And I know that, you know, they had a positive attitude about it. So I'm very encouraged by what I saw with our students at my school last year and what I've heard our students did here at Spicewood last year. The CDC also recommends that masks be worn indoors by all individuals. And the CDC also states that it is one way to prevent the spread of COVID. We will set up mask-free zones outside. So if students are outside playing on the playground and they feel like they need a break from their mask, we'll have a specific area where they can go and take off their mask, and they are 6 feet away from any of their peers. But it just provides that opportunity for them to just be mask-free for a little bit or catch their breath if they need to do that, but just having that out there while they're outside. On-campus events, I know that was another big topic on our Padlet. So again, non-essential visitors may participate in campus activities after school hours. So we will have opportunities for families to come up and to gather, for us to have you know, some events on our campus, outdoor events on our campus, as long as they're after school hours. And we'll be working with our PTA to talk about how we can continue to have some of the wonderful Spicewood events, and you know, how we can have those while keeping in mind everyone's level of comfort and the safety of our community. We do plan to have a Meet the Teacher. Again, this is our preliminary planning, so we're definitely seeking input from our teachers next week when they come onto campus. But right now, our thought is to have staggered times for Meet the Teacher. That way we minimize the size of the groups that we have here. We'll stagger them by last name, so by the alphabet. If your last name falls within the certain letters of the alphabet, that will be the time for the families to come up here to meet the classroom teacher, drop off supplies. And when we do host that Meet the Teacher, we are going to strongly encourage all parents and students to wear masks up here, and our teachers as well. All right, so parent questions. A very, I know, understandably, a very big topic of conversation is the masked and unmasked classrooms. And I completely understand the rationale for the question and the desire for that kind of arrangement. However, as the district stated, it really is a very difficult and challenging thing for us to do in terms of our scheduling. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of information about what makes it so hard for us to do a masked and unmasked classroom setup. Our class lists happen in the spring of the year before. There are many factors that go into the creation of class lists. And it's a very collaborative approach as well. So the current grade level teachers have, you know, a lot of knowledge of their students, of the student needs, of the dynamics of the different students at that grade level. So they're a big part in helping create these classes that are balanced. We also have to take into consideration academic and behavior concerns when we're making classes. There are specific educational needs and supports that individual students may have. And we have to think about that when we're creating classes. So, you know, because there are a lot of different players involved in providing some of these supports, you know, we have to look at scheduling and how we can cluster certain groups of students so that those services can be provided. And then we also have to think about, are the classes balanced? Are they equitable? You know, we don't want to have a classroom that is imbalanced in any way. You know, we want to have a nice, balanced, equitable class composition. And then when we start trying to make changes to classes, then it throws all of those things kind of out of whack, so to speak. So we can no longer necessarily take into consideration, you know, some student relationships that might do better if they're separate, or that they did really well together and we want to keep them together. So it's really challenging for us to start moving students around. I would also expect that there could be a potential imbalance of class size if we have a significant number of families who are wanting their child to be masked at school and a very few number of students who aren't masked. Then that's going to mean a class is going to be overcrowded, which then means that we are absolutely not able to provide any kind of social distancing. You know, I also would be concerned about any possible stigma associated with the masked and unmasked classrooms. We certainly don't want to have any, you know, any kind of spotlight shown on any student. And then even if we were to have a classroom with masked students, at any given point, if a student decides to take off his or her mask, we have no way of enforcing that that student put the mask back on. The student has the right to keep their mask off in the classroom. And so there's really no way to manage that. And then there's really no way for us to keep masked and unmasked students separated throughout the day. So that the idea of, you know, having them in separate parts of the school throughout every single activity, recess, special areas, it's just not something that we're going to be able to manage. But again, I want to reiterate that my message is going to be that I strongly encourage everyone to wear a mask while they're here at school. I think it's very important that we are all taking this seriously. I'm listening to the news, I'm hearing what's happening. And, you know, our students are in a population right now where they are not eligible for the vaccine. So we need to do what we can to make sure that we are supporting them and keeping them as safe as possible. Another topic that was discussed was social emotional needs of our students, and that is a campus-wide focus this year. It's something that Ms. McQuain and Ms. Peoples and I have been discussing as we're planning our professional development. We are making sure that we have time built into our master schedule for morning meetings. So every class will start the day with a morning meeting. That gives time for students to, you know, share their feelings, to, you know, just have the opportunity to build that community in the classroom, to start building those relationships first thing when they walk in the door. We also have our counselor guidance lessons. I will be collaborating, and our whole leadership team will be collaborating with Ms. Kintop on supporting our SEL needs for our students and our staff members. And I also have already started the process of requesting funds for Capturing Kids' Hearts training at Spicewood. It's not something we're going to be able to do at the very beginning of the school year, but I'm hoping it's something that we can do maybe in January, where we have our staff trained in capturing kids' hearts, so that we are really keeping the focus on our SEL needs here. In terms of instruction, so this year will resemble more of a traditional school year. I know there was a lot of screen time last year, and you know, that was a necessity, and I understand that. But this year we're going to be transitioning back into a more traditional school year. So we will still have some, as we did before. There are always opportunities for intentional and purposeful blended learning in a classroom. And that could be, you know, a center rotation. That could be, you know, creating something on Seesaw. So there are opportunities for that still exist, that are good and useful and purposeful, and a great extension of the learning that's happening in the classroom. But it certainly will not be our sole focus and mode of instructional delivery. Our students will have access to resources and to manipulatives, so those will not be limited or put away. We will, I'm still waiting to hear about how we will provide access to instruction or resources during quarantine. The district has not provided guidance on that yet. I do know that it's not going to be a situation where if a student has to quarantine or isolate, they will then be connected to the virtual learning environment. So we are still working on how we are going to provide access to that instruction during that time. We will make sure that we're having weekly meetings, weekly team meetings, to collaborate and focus on our students' level of mastery. So that's going to be a big focus, making sure that, you know, the learning that was kind of disrupted last year, it stays on track this year, and that our students are making that, are making those gains and are mastering the content and ready for the next school year. As I said, we are planning to host Meet the Teacher. Right now, our tentative plan is August the 16th. We are going to have the staggered times to minimize the crowd. We're going to strongly encourage masks, and we're going to have time included for a self-guided tour. So our plan right now is to have all of our grade levels, our essential area teachers, librarian, other staff members on our campus create a QR code that is visible on either the entry of the library or the office. And parents can come and scan the code and learn about that particular program, or, you know, the purpose of their role on the campus. So that there will be time built into that Meet the Teacher for families to do that self-guided tour. We'll probably have some kind of map to help guide you to. We'll be creating introductory videos so that our teachers are introducing themselves to their new students. And we are planning right now to have those sent to families on August the 13th, which is a Friday. I believe that's right. And I do believe, yes, that is the end of my presentation. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing now and see if we have any further questions.
We do have quite a few questions, Ms. Hill. The first one I did answer in the chat. It was about anybody who is new to SWES or new to in-person this year, and just asking about what the pre-screen process looks like.
Great. Do you want to answer that?
Absolutely. So when we ask parents to pre-screen their children, we're essentially just asking that they take their child's temperature, and please do not send your child to school if their temperature is 100 degrees or higher. We also ask that you just ensure that your child is not displaying any symptoms that are consistent with COVID-19. And so we will send out a pre-screening letter that the district has created that lists all of the symptoms that we are referring to at Meet the Teacher. The next question is, what is the Merv rating on the filters at Spicewood? I actually reached out to our custodial department to see if they have this information, and they do not, but I'm happy to reach out further to see if we can get that information. I did write down the name of the parent who asked, and so.
Okay, great, thank you.
The next question is, can you elaborate on the specifics of social distancing as much as possible? Is Spicewood expecting full enrollment? And in that case, is it safe to assume that no classroom or cafeteria will be able to adhere to the 3 feet guidance?
Sure. At this point, our enrollment is a little under what was projected for the current year. I believe we have approximately 780 students registered for the school year. I do know that we have so far 49 students who have opted for the virtual school for the year. So it looks like we're going to have fairly full class sizes. It certainly isn't going to be the 10 to 12 that we might have seen last year. But I don't believe we have any grade level that's going to be over capacity, which would be over 22. But there are some variations across grade levels. So there are some grade levels that would have smaller class sizes just because of the enrollment in that grade level. So that looks like in a classroom, a challenge for social distancing. However, to the extent that we are able to provide that, we will. And that could mean, some students sitting on the carpet during a direct instruction time, especially in the primary grades, and some students at their desks or tables. And that way there is that ability to space them out a little bit more. But when you have a class of 20 students and you have furniture, it does become quite challenging. Our rooms aren't that large. We will try to, we'll make sure that any excess furniture or resources that aren't going to be used are off the floor or out of the way. So it does provide more space for our students. But my guess is that we're not going to be able to maintain, certainly not 6 feet in a classroom. And it's probably going to be difficult in many situations to maintain the 3 feet in a classroom, but we're going to do everything that we can. Again, we do have plexiglass, so that is always an option. That is an additional layer, additional barrier to protect your child. In terms of the cafeteria, we are really working through a plan for lunchtime. Because that we do recognize that being a particularly more challenging space, because students who even are wearing masks to school will not have them on during lunchtime. So a consideration that we're having is, having some students in the cafeteria. If we minimize the number of classes eating in the cafeteria, then we can socially distance the students better. To the extent we are able, encouraging lunch to happen outside. We're also considering the possibility of some classes staying in the classroom to have their lunch. That would not require teachers to stay with them. We would have office staff, administrators, educational assistants monitoring the lunchtime, so they could monitor the halls and make sure students are doing okay during that lunchtime, but that would keep the students together and then minimize the number of students in the cafeteria. If we are looking at doing outdoor lunch, and I actually walked the campus yesterday to see what kind of spaces we would have for outdoor lunch. We're fortunate to have some great outdoor seating, not a lot of coverage. So in the event of any kind of inclement weather, that would kind of throw a wrench into those plans. But there are some spaces that are covered where we might be able to have, 2 or 3 classes having lunch. And if we are going to look at something like that, which I think would definitely be a viable option, it would probably require some parent volunteers to help us monitor that during lunchtime. So if it looks like we have some volunteers, I would consider that essential, an essential visitor. If it looks like we would have, a plentiful pool of parent volunteers to come in and help us with that, then that's definitely something that we could plan for. But we are exploring options to make sure that some of those kind of higher, I guess the potential for more crowded areas, we're doing what we can to minimize the number of students in there.
Thank you. The next question is, will the school take temperatures to distinguish between allergies and COVID, just to ensure that the students are actually having to go into quarantine and isolation?
I would assume that anytime a student is referred to the health room, that their temperature, if they're referred to the health room and they are presenting with symptoms, that their temperature will be checked. Is that correct here? Is that the same process here at Spicewood?
Yes, that is correct. Anytime that a student begins to display any symptom that could be consistent with COVID-19, the teachers know to send them to the nurse, and she will do all of the screening from there. So she does check temperatures. She'll actually call the families just to ensure that this is not a symptom that is related to like a medication or a typical allergy. And then that conversation can be had between the parent and the nurse. The next question is, are there any plans for rapid antigen tests for school staff and administration if COVID cases show up on campus?
I have not heard anything about that in Round Rock, and you might know more about that if that was an option that was available in Round Rock ISD last year.
Yes, Round Rock ISD does provide free COVID testing to all staff and students, and that is something that I have been told will continue this school year.
Is that something we provide on our campus?
No, it's not on our campus. It's actually right down McNeil at the PAC. They have it available there. The next question is, have you heard any more about trade-offs about wearing masks for extended periods of time? I know that there was some research about it where they say that using masks may restrict elimination of CO2.
You know, I have not done a lot of research into that. I have heard, you know, from health correspondents on the news that children wearing masks, individuals wearing masks do not pose a health risk in regards to oxygen levels. That is the information that I've heard. Again, I haven't done a great deal of research. What I do know is that you know, the benefits of wearing a mask outweigh, you know, any possible risk that I've heard of mentioned at all, especially in preventing the spread of COVID-19.
The next question is, how can we request desk shields?
Just let your teacher know that you would like a desk shield, and we have them. They're here. They're available, readily available.
Yes. The next question is, will teachers be able to remind students to mask up? They are elementary students and will need reminders even if they want to wear a mask. A reminder is not a mandate.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't see any issue with them saying, you know, with a teacher reminding a student, especially if it's, you know, the family's request that the student wear a mask, the teacher can remind them to put their mask on.
The next question is, why can't we enforce masks if parents sign a note that a mask for their child is medically necessary?
I don't have the answer to that. I believe that if it's a medical necessity, that would probably require a doctor's note. And then at that point, we might have some ability to enforce that. But based on the executive order signed by Abbott, we are not able to enforce mask wearing for anyone at school.
Can we request a vaccinated teacher?
So teachers are under no obligation to reveal any kind of personal information about themselves, about their medical history. It is not something that they need to disclose. It's not something I'm going to ask them. I respect their privacy to that. And so they're not obligated to disclose that information to anyone. So I don't know who would be vaccinated and who would not be vaccinated.
That goes along with the next question. Are we able to share the overall vaccination rate of the staff? And I think that answered that question as well.
Correct.
The next question is, can we request a masked teacher?
So we are not going to be able to move students around based on masked and unmasked requests. So it would be the same with a teacher.
Will there be a meeting like this for those who have chosen the virtual option?
A meeting by the virtual school, I'm not certain if there's going to be a meeting. I'm assuming that there's going to be some type of introduction, some type of onboarding process, so to speak, but I'm not certain what their plans are in terms of communicating with families who have signed up for the virtual option.
How will virtual students be kept connected to Spicewood?
That's a great question. So we want to keep our Spicewood students connected. We ask if you have not already, if you are not already signed up to receive newsletters, please do that. Sign up for the PTA, join our PTA so that you can get communication from our PTA as well. So definitely all of those avenues where we're able to communicate with you, we want you receiving those so that you can stay part of this community.
Will parents be able to walk their kindergarten students to their classrooms on the first day?
We are not able to allow visitors in the building during school hours, but we will have that opportunity for Meet the Teacher before school starts. So you will be able to walk your child to the classroom, see the classroom for yourself. And then hopefully once we are able to get our young students vaccinated, we will be able to provide more opportunities for parents to be in here during the school day.
For students enrolled in special programming like TAG, special education, Section 504, intervention, if they enroll in virtual school and then transfer back to Spicewood in the middle of the semester, how will we arrange them in Spicewood classes?
So if you were enrolled at Spicewood before the virtual option, then your child was already in a class. So we are keeping a placeholder, so to speak, for your child. So they will be placed in the classroom where they were, because like I said, those classrooms were created in a way that allowed for those services to continue to support our students.
Will students continue to receive these services in their virtual school?
They will. So any services that they were receiving in at Spicewood, they will continue to receive. So if they have a 504 accommodation plan, they will receive that. An IEP, they will receive their IEP services. TAG services will also be provided. So all of those services are going to be available there as well.
Do any forms need to be filled out if parents want their children to attend in person?
There is a process. I believe it's a similar process to the request to transfer to the virtual school. I believe you would just then request to transfer back to the home campus.
Are we allowing teachers to have air purifiers in the classroom?
Oh, absolutely. I assume so. I know I've seen them in some classrooms.
Yes, a few teachers do have those in the classrooms already. Do the virtual learning students have the opportunity to meet their teacher virtually before school starts?
I assume that the virtual setup is going to have an opportunity for the students to meet their teacher. But again, the virtual learning program is more at the district level. So we're really not part of that planning process. They've hired teachers and staff members to lead that, to coordinate all of those efforts, all the communication, all the instructional delivery. So their plans are separate from our plans here at the campus level.
What is the COVID testing requirement? That is, if a teacher or child is displaying COVID symptoms, are they required to get a COVID test and communicate results back to school so that that information can be used for contact tracing and quarantine requirements?
No, students and staff members are not. No one is obligated to have a COVID test. It is definitely recommended and encouraged, but we cannot ask that someone be tested. That is up to the individual.
Can I elaborate on that a little bit, Ms. Hill, as well, based on what the protocol was last year? A student and staff member, if they became symptomatic, they were required to either have a COVID test or an alternative diagnosis from a medical professional. So while we could not provide or require a COVID test be had, we did require some sort of documentation letting us know that the symptoms they were experiencing were not related to COVID-19. I'm not sure if that's what the procedures will be like this year as well, but that is what we followed last year. The next question is, can a student switch from virtual to in-person once things settle down a little?
Yes, absolutely. At any point that can happen, and vice versa. There might be a 2-day waiting period if someone is signing up for virtual after the deadline. But yes, that the transition can happen at any point.
Is there any difference in the academic syllabus for virtual learning students versus on-campus students other than the extracurricular activities?
I believe that I'm pretty confident the virtual students will receive the same curriculum that is used throughout Round Rock ISD.
Can we request outdoor lunch only?
We are going to try to make outdoor lunch happen if it's a possibility, but we can't guarantee that outdoor lunches can happen because of space limitations, because we might have weather that prevents us from being outside to have lunch. We might not also have the supervision that we need to make sure that kids are safe while they're outside eating lunch.
What is the process for switching students to and from virtual learning?
It's the same process for requesting a transfer in the district. I believe it's using the same system that is used. So however that request would happen, just in a traditional from one campus to another transfer request, it's that same process. And that happens online, but there's also, our campus will have paper copies or applications for that transfer after the deadline, I believe.
What is the protocol if there's a COVID outbreak across multiple classes or grades? How will the community be informed, and will the class, grade, and school need a shutdown?
I'll let you address that question, since that was part of your responsibility as a COVID coordinator last year.
Absolutely. So last year, and like I mentioned, the protocol may change a little bit this year, but from what I understand, we are going to continue with similar protocol. If there was a positive COVID case on our campus, I sent out a notification by 5 o'clock that afternoon, the day that we found out about the case. If we found it necessary to quarantine an entire class, that class would move to a virtual learning setting. They would remain with that teacher because the teacher would also go into quarantine. If we did not have any COVID outbreaks that required more than just a class to be quarantined at a time, and that was essentially for extra safety precautions. Because of the safety precautions that we had in place, we did not have any community spread on our campus. And so a student or staff member that did test positive did not actually pass that along to anybody else on our campus. So very fortunate for that, but we will follow that same procedure. Anytime that we have a positive student or staff member, there will be a community notification that goes out via email. And if your child's class has to quarantine, we will call you, notify you, and students will leave campus immediately. The next question is, what are the quarantine rules for school-aged siblings of COVID-exposed students? I can also speak on that. Siblings of students who are asked to quarantine because they've been in close contact with somebody who is a positive or a probable case of COVID-19 are not required to quarantine unless they also become symptomatic. So if the child that was in close contact becomes symptomatic, they are then a probable case, which means that they've been in close contact and they are symptomatic, which we would treat as a positive case. So then anybody in the household would be asked to quarantine as well. We do communicate with the siblings of students at other campuses as well, as long as they are in Round Rock ISD. So when we do our close contact case reviews, we will ask if you have any other children in Round Rock ISD or if any of your family members work in Round Rock ISD, and they will also be taken into consideration when we look at quarantine and isolation protocol. The next question is, if I get a note from my doctor that my child's health depends on them only interacting with masked individuals, will you honor it?
I am not certain how much I will be able, or to the extent possible that can happen. As I said, it is really difficult for us to make sure that someone other than an individual who has a doctor's note is wearing a mask at all times. I can't require that that's happening. So I have no way of guaranteeing that I could honor that.
Can a student switch between virtual and in-person multiple times throughout the school year? If yes, how will their curriculum be synced between virtual and in-person?
I assume that it's possible to switch back and forth. I'm not certain if there's a cap on the number of times that can happen. That would be something we would probably need more information about. Again, we all follow a curriculum in Round Rock ISD. So whatever the instruction that's happening at the virtual school, we would be also providing that instruction here at Spicewood.
Will special education or tag services be provided by the home campus or by the virtual campus?
They'll be provided by the virtual campus.
Will we be using Schoology again this year?
I think we will be using Schoology again this year.
From what I have heard,
Is that the platform for the virtual and kind of virtual instruction in Round Rock?
Yes, and Round Rock ISD did renew that, and we will be utilizing it again this year from what we've been told. The next question is, will there be teachers from Spicewood teaching the virtual classes? Do you know if virtual teachers are also teachers teaching on campuses in Round Rock ISD?
I know that the district has hired teachers for the virtual teaching. So they have not taken teachers from campuses for the virtual teaching. So they actually had job postings and they've hired teachers outside of current employees. So we don't have, we're not going to have Spicewood teachers necessarily teaching in the virtual school. That's a separate school, a separate process.
Will the COVID dashboard be used to communicate cases to the community?
Yes, that is my understanding, that they're going to continue to use the COVID dashboard.
When will we know if the COVID negative test requirement will be in place for this year too?
I assume that once I had to identify our COVID coordinator for the campus. I had to submit that yesterday. So I assume that they are collecting that information so that they can schedule meetings to provide information to all COVID coordinators at the campus level. So we probably will be getting that pretty soon.
If quarantined for or isolated for 10 days or quarantined for 14 days, can the student continue virtual learning for those days?
Yeah, if they're already in the virtual school, then I believe that they will be able to continue to learn virtually.
Can you confirm that the student's classroom place will be held while a student is enrolled in the virtual program so that the student can rejoin after a vaccination is available?
Yes, we are going to make sure, to the extent that we can, there's always a possibility of When the district goes through the leveling process, there are possibilities where if we have a surplus of teachers, which it does not look like we're going to have, because again, the district is not going to penalize a campus for the loss of students who have decided to do virtual. So the the district recognizes that the students from Spicewood who are at the virtual school will eventually be back at Spicewood. So they're not going to use that against us, so to speak. So if there is a situation where a campus, say, had a surplus of teachers because their enrollment just wasn't where it was supposed to be, then there's a possibility that a teacher would be moved from that campus to another campus. It doesn't look like that's a possibility for us because, as I said, pretty much every grade level we have the close to the capacity that we're supposed to have. So yes, our plan is to keep the class lists just as they were, so that when the student returns back to campus, they are going to go back into the classroom where they had previously been slated to be in the first place.
There was a thank you from a parent, and then they asked, what can the community do to help Spicewood make this as stress-free and safe as possible?
Well, that's a wonderful offer, and I appreciate that. I think that just, supporting what we're doing here and what we're trying to do to keep our kids safe. I know that there's not 100% agreement on wearing masks. I understand that. I do think that, I ask for patience. I think there's a lot of COVID fatigue out there. I certainly was in a mindset that this school year was going to be so much different than last school year. I think that this Delta variant really kind of threw a lot of us for a loop. I think that we were all geared up for just, things are back to normal. And then here we are kind of starting the year off again in a similar fashion. And I know that's hard. I know it's a letdown, and it's not going to be what we had hoped for. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to be great. And so I think just keeping that positive spirit, that momentum, knowing that it's just hopefully just a little bit longer. That's all we have, and we can do it. We can get through this together. And when we do, it's going to be, we're going to be a stronger community because of it. So just, kind of keeping that attitude, keeping spirits up, staying connected to the Spicewood community if you are choosing the virtual option, so that when we come back together, we're, it's like we never left. So I think those are really great ways that our community can support at this time. And if you have any suggestions also, Ms. Peoples.
I think that sounds great. I think just ensuring that we are staying positive and supporting our students and our staff members through this. I know, like you said, Ms. Hill, it's not going to be an easy start to the year, but we do appreciate all of the flexibility and all of the positivity that you are sending our way as we begin to another school year, similar to how we did last year. Will all Spicewood students, regardless of if they start in person or virtually, receive notification of who their Spicewood teacher is prior to the start of school?
If a student is already in the virtual learning school, then they will not receive that communication. But once they return back on campus, we will make sure that their teacher reaches out to them before they come back to school on campus.
There have been a couple of additional questions asking for clarification about instruction when students are asked to isolate or quarantine.
Again, we haven't received any guidance from the district on what that's going to look like. And I'm not certain what kind of resources the district might be able to provide for students who need to quarantine or isolate. but that's definitely questions that we have as principals that we are asking our supervisors. And it's also conversations that we're going to have here once our teachers return back in person. We can talk about how we will support students who might need to quarantine.
Why has Spicewood had such a high teacher turnover in the last 2 years? How can we help to mitigate this?
I am going to admit that I'm not really 100% certain of the turnover and who left and the reasons why they left. I know that, there are possible instances where people might have moved out of the area and had to quit because of that. You might have more information about that. Certainly, the last year was tough for a lot of educators. I think that we saw overall in our state, in our country, we saw a lot of teachers who didn't feel comfortable teaching in a situation like this, make different decisions, or maybe they had to stay home to support family members. So I'm not certain of the individual choices of the teachers who were here at the campus level. But I do know that from what I've seen so far, because I've had the opportunity to interact with a lot of our staff members, a lot of our teachers. We had a meet and greet here, and then I was also with many of them at our IB training that we had. And we have a really, really remarkable group of teachers. So I feel really great about them. I think that the students are going to love their teachers. I think the community will be very happy with the new hires, our new additions to the campus.
Ms. Zellner did put a link in the chat for anybody who would like to follow the PTA Facebook page. And she said that Spicewood Beautification is happening on Friday and Saturday. So that's exciting. And then the last question that we have here in the chat is, does Spicewood have a new art teacher this year?
We do have a new art teacher, and her name is
Katie Castellane.
Yes, still learning all those names. But yes, I've met her. She's very enthusiastic and eager, and she was so happy to go into her classroom and just find a wealth of resources and materials. So she is ready to hit the ground running. I'm really excited.
That was the last question that we had in the chat, Ms. Hill.
All right, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you all coming and spending your morning with us. And again, I really do look forward to the opportunity to meet you in person and to say hi and to get to know your students, your kids. I'm very excited and eager to meet our Panthers, new and old. So thank you very much. And here's to a great year. And thank you, Ms. Peoples, for helping with the questions and the answers as well.
Of course, thank you. And it was great to see everybody.
Bye.